Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, taking a closer look at Kentucky Derby Contender Midnight Bourbon. Let's take a peek at this hulking son of Tiz Now. He is certainly built to get a mile and a quarter. He is bred to get a mile and a quarter. His sire, of course, a two-time winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic. This horse has been very consistent, Mike. I wouldn't say he's flashy, but he seems to show up every time. He has never been off the board.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, Dan. He's very consistent. He has, that sort of running style that often leads to really good trips. He has speed, but he doesn't really need to be on the lead. He just likes to be up close to the pace. And he just doesn't really have that acceleration that you want to see, Dan. He just sort of stays at one gear around the racetrack. I guess that bodes well for his chances to get a mile and a quarter.
Let's talk about his three-race campaign down at the fairgrounds this winter for trainer Steve Asmussen. He had everything his own way in the Lecomte Stakes. It was a race where there were some other speeds on paper. They scratched out. Joe Talamo wisely used this horse's speed off the layoff. They walked on the lead, and he sprinted on home.
Right. That was his 3-year-old debut, and he just had all the best of it that day to win with a new buyer top. His two starts since then, I guess you could say he's run at least as well as he did in winning that Lecomte. He just hasn't been quite good enough to defeat the likes of Mandaloon and Red Hot Charlie. Good trips in both of his two races since the Lecomte, and he ran fine. He just wasn't quite good enough to win, and he had no discernible excuse that I could see.
When we watch his races in the Risen Star and the Louisiana Derby, those paces were not necessarily fast, and they seemed to hold up for the most part. He's going to be facing horses in Kentucky that are exiting faster pace races and are arguably quicker from the gate. There's a chance that Midnight Bourbon might find himself farther off the pace than we've seen him in his last three races. And do you think that would work against him?
I mean, that's certainly true. I don't know that it would work against him. Personally, when I watch him race, he doesn't seem to me like a horse who's so intent on being on the lead. And then if he doesn't, get right up close to the pace, then he just doesn't run his race. I think he'd actually be fine having to sit a little bit further off it. The question is, can he finally take a step forward, Dan? Because he just has to run a faster race if he's going to take down the entire field to win the Kentucky Derby. He's a really likable horse. I think there are things to like about him. He just feels like he's in a position now where he has to take a really big step forward in his next race.
He has paired up 96 buyers in his last two races, so he's sort of knocking on the door among the better buyer horses in the race, with a 100 being the best last figure coming in. Let's talk a little bit about the workouts at Churchill Downs. This horse has turned some heads, a couple of bullets on April 11th and April 19th. Certainly worth keeping an eye on, because this horse is seemingly thriving at Churchill.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not going to put too much stock into the workouts at this point. I suspect that most of these horses are going to be training up to their absolute best on the way into the Kentucky Derby, or at least that's how their connections are going to try to lay it out. The fact that he handles the surface and that he's training, appearing to be in good form in his training, I guess those are positives, Dan.
What price would you take on a horse like Midnight Bourbon in the Derby? You believe he has to run a little bit faster, but he is consistent. He does have the grinding style that would make a mile and a quarter, perhaps something that he would appreciate. What sort of price do you think he'll be? I think he could be at between 15 and 20 to 1 even.
Yeah, I thought he'd be one of the bigger prices as well. I can certainly see him drifting. And, he just doesn't have that one race that I think is going to attract anybody's real attention in here, Dan. And so, him being a big price, I think makes him, mildly interesting, at least, because as you've already pointed out, he's not that far off the top buyers in the field. I know you could say that about just about everybody heading into this race the first Saturday in May, but he doesn't have to improve all that much. And I just feel like he's going to get a good trip in the race. Whether he's good enough to win or not, I don't know. That remains to be seen, but I can certainly see him getting a piece of this.
And the great Mike Smith will take the mount for the first time for his Hall of Fame trainer, Steve Asmussen. Midnight Bourbon is lurking under the radar. He's training well. He's never finished off the board, and he's coming in off a pair of buyer tops. Perhaps an interesting long shot on the first Saturday in May.